finna get court today.
We got another swamp. Swamp stories. I'm in the family drinking Kool-Aid. Hey, we got the MS-13, but the Natilos. I don't know how to say it. They don't chop my head about Mexicans. Y'all fuck with y'all fuck, man. Y'all be sucasos, you know what I'm saying? I'm just playing, but yeah. Let's get into it. Tie that bitch up. Hey, it's my brother today. Man, my brother, RP my brother. Y'all say rest in peace, do some comments. Y'all fucking with Leaky gang and fire that bitch up and let's get into the damn video.
Welcome back to another episode of Swamp Stories. For this episode, we cover a topic that many people don't know about. Of course, by now, everyone knows the names in the title, but I highly doubt that you know what their relationship consists of. So in this video, we're gonna cover the story and development of the two groups and how they ended up being at odds. This is California history. But before we get into it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're new. You can also follow the Instagram page as well. So let's get into it. In order for this video to make sense, let's head all the way back to the start and talk about some important history. Back in the 1920s, Los Angeles was a city of just 500,000 residents. And that may seem like a lot, but consider that it was spread out over a large mass of land. Well, long story short, a group called Clanton 14 formed around this time. And then in the 1960s, out of rejection from Clanton, a group called 18th Street formed in the same area. So essentially, 18th was a collection of guys who weren't allowed in Clanton because they weren't from LA. So the 1960s and 70s were all about 18th and Clanton 14. We can cover this in a separate episode. And that takes us to 1980. Here is where the story starts. Everything started with a man named Ernesto Miranda. Okay, people in the comments are gonna flame me for how I said that, so let me try this. Ernesto Miranda. Congratulations! Anyways, Ernesto was born and raised in El Salvador during their wild years. Every day was chaos during the 1970s, to the point where he decided that enough was enough. So in 1980, by himself, the 18-year-old Ernesto moved to Los Angeles. He arrived with little to no money, but was able to pick up a job and rent a room in the Pico Union neighborhood. And here is where things get complicated. He began running into issues with local groups such as Clanton 14 and the Rolling 20s, and that's when he realized Los Angeles was nothing like the movies. So after a short time, he didn't feel comfortable rolling alone any longer, so he got together with everyone who had moved from El Salvador. A group of around 10 people collectively got together and started a group called MS-13. They began growing fast throughout Los Angeles due to the large influx of Salvadorians. And these were not guys that you wanted to mess with. That's because they were trained professionally by US Green Berets. So it's safe to say that these guys were way more prepared than anyone in California. And since the very start, nearly everyone in LA despised MS due to their wild nature. It's mainly because they wanted to truly take over everything around them. Unlike the Hoovers or Black P. Stones who happily just claim and represent the area they're from, MS wanted to take over everyone else's area. And unfortunately, that tendency is the only reason for this story. Well, over the years, MS developed their tattoos, hand signs, and alliances throughout LA. And during this time, they decided to align with La M, also known as the Mafia. This was a major decision because it placed them as allies with the Southsiders. But because they now share the 13, they had to differentiate themselves. So they usually get MS tatted on their cheeks, forehead, and hands in order to make it known who they belong to. But unlike many other organizations, they aren't centered anywhere. Although they started out in Pico Union, it's not necessarily where they're centered. By the middle of the 1980s, they were spread out throughout LA, but the 1990s is when things got crazy. This is when MS started expanding to Central America. Despite popular belief, this was not some sort of elaborate plan. Instead, it was a consequence of MS members being sent back home. And when they arrived in El Salvador, they brought their LA culture with them. So during the 1990s, MS started spreading like a wildfire throughout the Northern Triangle area. And for those who aren't familiar, this consists of El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. Many will tell you that ever since the expansion, this is where MS is the most active. But we're not here to cover MS's southern expansion. Instead, we cover their expansion up north. So let's get it started. The
They're
story
just up
starts
north.
out in the early
Damn.
2000s because that's when MS started migrating up north. But just like the 1990s, this was not planned as well. Instead, many families from the Triangle area immigrated to the Bay Area and naturally brought their alliances with them. At first, they didn't think that this could be a problem, but they quickly realized that they were not very well received. On top of this, there were very few people representing MS. Instead, it was filled with people wearing red. And that takes us to the Nortes, or Northsiders or Northerners or whatever you want to call them. Either way, these guys are everywhere throughout Northern California. From Merced to Modesto, Antioch, Oakland, and most importantly, San Francisco. The Nortes started out way back in 1968. They're supposed to represent a unified Northern California, but that's not really the case. In fact, there have been all kinds of inner rivalries between them throughout the years, with the biggest being in Sacramento. However, when a rival moves to town, they all unite. But the point is that the Nortes are nothing to mess with as well, despite having smaller numbers in general than MS, 18th, and Southsiders. And with that comes a major Napoleon complex. It's kind of similar to the LA versus Bay Area rivalry. And for those of you who don't know, LA does not care about the Bay Area, so the Bay Area feel like they have something to prove. Meanwhile, LA is 100 times better and everyone knows it. So MS and Southsiders know that they're much bigger and Northerners feel like they have something to prove. Anyways, now that you know the context, let's head to where the story begins. Welcome to San Francisco's Mission District. Today, the area is known for Mark Zuckerberg techies and $14 smoothies. But back in the 2000s, the Mission had a whole different reputation. It was known as the city's sketchiest area, but also for being the largest Norte neighborhood in the whole Bay. From 16th down to 24th is their main area, with 24th being their strongest presence. And starting around 2000, a rivalry with Southsiders started arising in the Mission. Slowly but surely, more and more members began moving into the Mission, and this established a way for MS to feel comfortable as well. So in 2002, a high-ranking MS named Luis Fuentes decided to move into the Mission. His plan was to establish a presence in the Mission to help out the outnumbered Southsiders. So just remember that La M aligns with MS and Southsiders. So naturally, when Luis and other MS moved to the Bay Area, they rode alongside the Southsiders. And of course, this did not make the Mission District happy, especially given their history and pride. And that takes us to June 30th, 2004. Luis Fuentes decides to walk down 24th Street to get some food with his son. Being that it's dark out, Luis isn't fearful of being noticed on 24, especially because he's new enough to the area, so
so he got caught because he down think he knew ain't nobody gonna recognize him. Damn.
he assumes that nobody knows his name or knows who he is. However, he makes one big mistake. He walks outside in a pair of blue Converse and with a blue sweatshirt on. 8 p.m. Luis makes his way down to 24th and Hampshire, which is probably the worst street he could possibly be on. And walking by is an 18-year-old named Marcos Reyes Campos. And this guy is a member of the 22nd and Bryant Locos, who associate with 24th. Well, as Luis is passing, Marco questions his colors and tattoos. And before Luis can even respond, bang! This incident was the very first of its kind in the Mission between MS and Northerners, and unfortunately it started a trend. After this, many more MS began moving to San Francisco, and one person stuck out more than any other. Let me introduce you to a young man named Edwin Ramos. Edwin was born and raised in El Salvador, but moved to San Francisco at 13 to live with his grandma. That was the year 2000, and by 2003, Edwin had fully jumped into the life that his grandmother opposed. She happened to live in the Mission, which historically was not a problem for new residents. But for Edwin, he decided to represent MS despite knowing the consequences. Well, by 2003, he had gained a wild reputation for causing chaos. In fact, on October 22nd, 2004, he started a scuffle with a group of 24th Street Northerners for no reason. Shortly after, he was caught and was later sent to Log Cabin Ranch. This was a small facility for juveniles located in the middle of the woods. It was dedicated to youth who the judges believed were good kids misled by their environment, so it gave them an opportunity to live in nature with others alike. And this is where Edwin lived for the next 2 years, but unfortunately it didn't convince him to change one bit. And that takes us to March 24th, 2006. It's a typical Friday night in the Mission, which means good times times, drinks, and a whole lot of partying. And on this night, 25th and Cap is where the local 24th Street Northerners are gathered together having fun. Well, around 9 p.m., Edwin gets news of the gathering and wants to put it to an end. So from his grandma's house, he storms down to 25th. Right there, he sees 21-year-old Rolando Chino Vallartes. Chino happens to be enjoying himself with his friends, and that's enough to make Edwin angry. So that's when he approaches. Bang. Edwin quickly leaves and heads back to his grandma's. After this, the neighborhood was upset because Chino was a very popular character. Well, after doing this, Edwin knew that his time in the mission was up. The numbers were simply not in his favor, so he decided to rent an apartment in a nearby city called El Sobrante. This is a secluded suburb of Richmond, pretty much hidden in the hills. But despite its suburban nature, the small city does have a Southsider presence. So within a week of living there, Edwin joined the local group known as Pasadena Locos 13. And because Southsiders and MS are aligned, this was not a big problem. But despite this move, he still had grievances in San Francisco. And that takes us to a forgotten about area of the city. Right near the south end of the city, you have a small area called the Excelsior, also known as the E. For a long time, this has been a Hispanic area, but overshadowed by the mission. That's partly because they only represent their neighborhood instead of a color. However, out-of-towners like Edwin don't seem to know the difference. And that introduces us to the Bologna family. This is your typical middle-class family in the Excelsior, just minding their business. June 22nd, 2008, the Bologna family drive out to a family picnic in Fairfield, California. And after spending the day there, at 2:15 p.m., they head down Highway 80 back to San Francisco. At 3 p.m., they arrive to their home on Maynard Street in the Excelsior. And as they're pulling in, a black Chrysler 300 rolls up beside them. In the Chrysler is Edwin Ramos, and he does not hesitate.
He killed all three of them.
This incident shocked the community, especially because they were a normal family. They had no relations or ties to anything of street nature. Well, a few months later, Edwin would go down for this thanks to his friend Douglas, I don't know how to say that, turning into an informant. It turns out that Douglas was driving the Chrysler and he got caught first. So SFPD offered him a way out by saying who did it, and that's exactly what he did. So Edwin Ramos got 50 years. Well, unfortunately, Edwin going down would not stop the madness anytime soon. At this time, living in the city and wearing red or blue could be a serious problem. And over the next few years, things only got worse, especially when more and more MS started moving north. And this time, 3 MS members had moved into the mission: Locos, Leaky, and Luis Sana. And these guys' entire mission was to get any northerner they could find. June 21st, 2010. While eating lunch in Bernal Heights, they notice one of the chefs is wearing red. So after eating, they sit in their car all day until the cook gets off. The cook, whose name is Alexander Tamaj, has nothing to do with the streets, but these guys do not know that. So at 5 p.m., they watch him get on the 14 Muni bus and follow it all the way until he gets off. He takes the bus all the way to the very last stop in Daly City, and that's when the men approach. This kind of event became way too common in San Francisco, to the point where a local rapper named Goldtoes decided to call for people to stop putting their family members in red or blue. And on top of this, Mission District rappers put out a song called San Francisco Anthem. This may not seem like a big deal, but the idea was to reunite the neighborhood and for everyone to take pride in the city. And not too long after this, the Department of Homeland Security took down San Francisco's MS entirely with 30 convictions. And it's safe to say that since then it has severely calmed down. These days the mission is divided into 2 sections, Army Street and 24th, but I can cover that in a part 2 if you want it. And instead of trying to have areas in the Bay, MS now has hideouts where they move low-key. One of those happened to be in the small town of Mendota, just a few hours south of the Bay Area. But to end the video, we cover one last incident that shocked the whole Bay, and that takes us to Novato, California. This suburb is known as one of the safest in California, where crime is extremely rare. In fact, the entire Marin County very rarely sees anything happen other than soccer moms spilling their Starbucks. It's literally the wealthiest and quietest place you can ever imagine. And that's why this story caught the national news. May 25th, 2016. Earlier in the month, a new student began attending Novato High. His name is Edwin Guerra, and he was born and raised in El Salvador. Also at the school are 2 other students who came over from El Salvador as well. That would be Juan Enriquez and Edwin Guevara, both of which are seniors who are a week away from graduation. But not only would they be graduating academically, but also from JROTC. Well, on the morning of May 25th, the teens get a call from a 650 number. So they pick up and it's a man named Eden Alfaro. He tells them that there's a student at their school who he needs gone. Alfaro then gives them his address, 2 p.m. The teens follow Edwin to his apartment on Fairway Drive, and that's when they approach him. Bang! This was a huge deal in Marin County because the area had never seen something like this in their entire history. It's almost like Calabasas or something where you'd never expect it.
Damn. Go to cop. Hell nah, bro. Damn. But that what they already knew what was going on. Don't fuck it. Leave the call. Hey, that's how you know it's a go. That's how you know he got to go. Leave tell you he got to go. He got to go. But oh God, hey, y'all like us up to the channel. We got this bitch. Alright, my brother.